This season of The Witch Wave is brought to you in part by Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab is a fragrance house specializing in body and household blends with a dark, romantic, gothic tone. Over the years, they've collaborated with some of my very favorite creative visionaries, including Neil Gaiman, Jim Jarmusch, the Jim Henson Company, and most recently, Junji Ito. They continually return to inspirations drawn from witchcraft, paganism, and mythology, and they also have a sister store called Twilight Alchemy Lab, which creates oils blended and consecrated specifically for ritual use. The lab recently released their annual Halloween perfume collection, a limited edition series which includes scents inspired by folklore accounts of lycanthropy. Customer reviews of their products can be found at the fan-run bpal.org web forum, and you can check out all of their perfumes and other enchanting concoctions over at blackphoenixalchemylab.com. Would you like even more Witch Wave? Do you wish that you could hear from me and my other magical guests on a weekly basis? And what about doing monthly rituals with yours truly? Then come join me over on Patreon, where you'll get bi-weekly bonus Witch Wave Plus episodes, ad-free Witch Wave episodes, and detailed show notes for all. I also lead a monthly online magical workshop, which you can attend live or watch the recording of at your convenience. Rewards for some tiers also include magical merch and contests where you can win Witchly prizes each month, as well as early heads up about my other workshops before they sell out. And you can even sign up for the opportunity to work with me one-on-one. And all backers get access to our exclusive digital coven where you can connect to a community of other wonderful Witch Wave witches around the world. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to patreon.com/witchwave now and sign up. It's a magnificent way to get more magic in your life and to support the show. Thanks so much.
The world is filled with bewitching people, and you might be one too. Welcome to the podcast where art is magic, magic is real, and reality is stranger than dreams. I'm Pam Grossman, and this is The Witch Wave.
Hello, and welcome to The Witch Wave. I'm so excited about today's guest, Jodi Wille, who is, among many other things, a brilliant documentary director who specializes in intentional communities and new religions. Jodi also happens to be a friend of mine, and over the years, we've had a lot of discussions about the light sides and the shadow sides of different spiritual groups. And I've always been fascinated by communities of kindred spirits who explore the metaphysical together and who come up with shared paradigms for living, which are imaginative, radical, positive alternatives to the status quo. Clearly, that's one of the reasons that I love the modern pagan movement, but it's also why I love learning about esoteric societies and mystery schools across the ages. But I've also grappled with the idea of collective spirituality over the years too. First of all, I'm an Aquarius, so I'm just not naturally a joiner.
My independence and individualism is central to my worldview, and I can sometimes get uncomfortable with the idea of being part of a group and potentially losing my autonomy or feeling any sort of pressure to follow one philosophy as part of some herd. However, once I entered my 20s, I suddenly started craving community, and I began to see the value of forming circles of shared interests and energy. And as many of you know, I eventually joined Robin Rose Bennett's Green Witch Apprenticeship Circle, which is where I learned how to do ritual with other witches and bear witness to each of their magical journeys, and to also allow them to bear witness to mine. It was a total leap of faith, and it got me out of my comfort zone. And it was also a real growth point for me in regard to shedding some of my own protective armor and learning to trust other people and be vulnerable with them. And the lessons I learned from my time in that circle, I've carried forward in everything I do, from making this podcast and leading rituals for our Patreon group and for the general public, to co-running the Occult Humanities Conference at NYU, and many other examples of different group activities and group organizations that I've since become part of. And what I love about the witchcraft community is that it allows for people to honor their individuality and stay solitary witches if and when they choose to. But it also provides different ways to connect and make magic with other witches if one wishes. But I know that there have been so many other magical and or spiritual groups throughout history who have come up with their own rituals and paths of study, and I'm so interested in when those things go right. I know that lots of documentaries and podcasts about cults and alternative communities gone wrong are all the rage right now, and I think it's important to know the signs of when these communities are actually cults. And some of those signs are things like there's one authoritarian leader or elite group of leaders who are never to be questioned or criticized. A cult also isolates people from their daily lives and community and is threatened by anyone or anything that is not considered part of their membership or worldview. A cult also generally stirs up a lot of fear about the outside world and purports to be the only safe and viable alternative to this allegedly scary, threatening environment. And a cult never wants you to leave it and guilts or punishes those who try to. Now, you might be thinking, gee, that sounds an awful lot like a certain faction of the Republican Party right now, and as far as I'm concerned, you would be right. But editorializing aside, I want to say that as much as I think it's so important to recognize cults and how they operate and to acknowledge the dark side of organized religions and alternative communities, I personally am not that interested in watching disturbing documentaries about them. If that's your jam, more power to you. I know true crime overall is an appealing genre to lots of people. I get it. But I am more interested in exploring alternative spiritual groups that are not cults. And that doesn't mean that they're not without their own complications or even problems at times. But I genuinely appreciate learning about those who have developed mystical groups or magical societies that are imaginative, visionary, and allow for participants to contribute their own ideas. And for those participants, crucially, to have the freedom to come and go as they please. And that is one of the things that I so appreciate and adore about Jodi Wille's films, especially the film that she's working on now, which is called Welcome, Space Brothers. Welcome, Space Brothers focuses on the ultra-artistic, flamboyant, at times, yes, wacky as hell group called Unarius, which was led by an ultra-vibrant and exuberant older woman named Ruth Gordon, also known as Uriel. Unarius still exists today, but its heyday was in California in the 1970s and 80s. And as you'll hear Jodi and I discuss, the documentary is anthropologically astute and nuanced and presents a lot of questions about group dynamics and fringe beliefs. But it is also largely affectionate toward these free-thinking spiritual bohemians. And besides all that, it is just so much fun to watch. Watching Jodi's film and then getting to speak with her all about it in this episode reminded me of how powerful and healing it can be to get together with a group of like-minded weirdos in order to try and evolve spiritually, to support each other's growth, and to make rituals and transformative creative work together. So even though Welcome Space Brothers isn't about witchcraft per se, it made me deeply appreciate once more that I get to be part of my own community of spellbinding, subversive seekers. And that is a gift indeed. But before we get to that, first, let's check and see what's come through on the Witch Wire.
Who is it?
Witches. Hey, Pam, it's Jen. I hope that you're doing well and that you're making amazing progress on your book. I wanted to send this voice memo through the Witch Wire to see if I could signal boost some magic through the worldwide witch web. I am very lucky to be traveling with a group of witches led by the fabulous Fiona Horn to Egypt next week. And on April 8th, which is the day of the total solar eclipse, we will be visiting the Philae temple complex dedicated to the goddess Isis. And as part of the magic that we'll be ritualizing there that day, we're going to be doing a group recitation of the passage, The Knot of Isis, from the book Awakening Osiris, which I know that you know quite well, as you yourself recommended it to me when I told you I was going to Egypt. So we're going to be doing that reading at sunrise, which is 5:35 a.m. in Egypt. And if anyone throughout the Witch Wire, the Witch Wave, and the Witch Web feels called to participate in that recitation and join us in giving an offering of our love and energy to the goddess Isis as she works her divine earth magic to resurrect her love, Osiris, it would be amazing. Many of us also recognize Osiris as the green man and a representation of the healthiest form of masculine expression in the world, which is so sorely needed right now. It would be amazing if anyone wanted to join us and send their energy along to signal boost that offering to the divine. Anyway, just sending this note with lots of love, lots of gratitude, and lots of magical blessings for everyone. And blessed be all of us during this eclipse. It's been a bit of a wild ride for me, and I'm sure for many others. But I think hopefully this means that perhaps the tides could be turning in our favor, my friends. Anyway, sending love. Bye for now.
Hi, Jen. It is so wonderful to hear your voice. And speaking of community, it has been such a gift watching our Grecian coven continue to stay in touch and make magic together long after our trip to Greece last year. And Jen, you have been such an instrumental part of helping to guide that group since our return and keeping us all connected to each other and to the other circles that you're part of. And I am so grateful for that. So thank you. So about your question. First of all, your trip to Egypt sounds fucking amazing. I am so jealous. I'm so excited for you, and I will very much be there in spirit as much as I wish I could be there in body. But first, I just want to give a little note about eclipses to everyone listening, since you want to do this ritual on the same day as the solar eclipse. So there's a general rule of thumb in the witchcraft and wider astrology communities, and it kind of says that eclipses are not a great time to do any sort of manifestation spell work on an individual level. So, like if you wanted to manifest a new job or manifest a change in your relationship, whatever it is on a personal level, eclipses are generally thought to not be a good time to do that. There's an old belief that equates eclipses with times of instability and erratic, powerful energy, and of course, with shadow. So, for individual magical work, eclipses are thought to be a good time to do shadow work, or in a lot of cases, to just lay low and do lots of self-care and soothing and grounding, just as you would during a dark moon phase. However, because eclipses often have a lot of collective attention and energy around them, in other words, lots of people focused on the same thing at the same time, and this solar eclipse will most certainly have that, it is a wonderful time to do careful, intentional group rituals on a more global scale. And it's a great time to do any sort of work around the concept of emerging and ushering in rebirth on this more universal scale as well. Because during an eclipse, the sun or the moon temporarily seem to disappear, but then it reemerges. And so any kind of mindful magic that touches on that energy of resurrection or of life cycles or of light going into darkness and then emerging into light again, all of these magical metaphors and energies can be really beautiful to tap into during an eclipse. And so the group ritual that you're describing sounds gorgeous and also relevant. And I know that it's also co-signed by witch leaders Fiona Horn and Phyllis Curate. And I know how mindful they are about such things too. So your ritual having their endorsement and encouragement on top of my own positive intuition about it makes me feel confident that this is a well thought out, purposeful ritual that is being conducted with lots of clear, careful intention and responsibility. And also, your ritual is taking place just before the eclipse, so not during the eclipse. And that makes me feel better about it too. And so, yes, I'm very happy to share the details of this ritual for those who would like to participate remotely. And Jen, you sent me a link, which I will share in the show notes. And I'll also say right now, the link is www.fionahorn.com/not-of-ISIS. Let me spell that out. That's Fiona, HORN.com/KNOT-OF-ISIS. And at that link, you'll see a PDF that explains what the ritual entails and when exactly to do the ritual. And if you're in the States, as I am, it'll actually be on the evening of April 7th, so the night before the eclipse, because this ritual that Jen will be doing will be happening just as the sun is rising in Egypt on eclipse day. So to be clear, everyone doing this remotely will be doing the ritual and sending our magic and energy at the same time to Jen and Fiona Horn and their group, to Isis and Osiris, and to all the other witches around the world who are participating. And hey, why don't we just have a big, beautiful intention around it? We're going to be sending this magic to the whole world. Why not? We'll be helping to celebrate and elevate Isis's magic from wherever we happen to be located in that moment. And I also understand that this ritual is being shared with other witchly communities and individuals across the globe. So the more the merrier. And so if you're listening and you read the ritual and you think it sounds wonderful, then feel free to share that link with your communities and your friends and, just spread it far and wide. I'm sure that Jen will appreciate the signal boost. And the more magic we can put towards a shared vision, the more potent and powerful it can be. And finally, I just want to give a quick explanation and shout out about the knot of Isis, which this ritual is based on. So, the knot of Isis is one of my favorite passages from Normandy Ellis's stunning, poetic book called Awakening Osiris. This is her own magical, lyrical reinterpretation of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And it's honestly, and I say this without hyperbole, one of the most beautiful books I've ever read in any genre. The language is just deeply exquisite and so very moving. I quote from it all the time. And the Knot of Isis is just one section of it, but it's perhaps my favorite section of it, particularly the following passage. Give me not words of consolation. Give me magic, the fire of one beyond the borders of enchantment. Give me the spell of living well. So I can't recommend Awakening Osiris more highly. And Jen, I think it's just so beautiful how you have adapted this text for such a powerful and heartfelt collective ritual. And that's how magic works. We are in constant dialogue with each other and with the spirits and with capital S spirit across space and time. And I'm so grateful to you, Jen, for adding your magic to the mix and for inviting so many of us to contribute ours as well. I hope you have the most magical time in Egypt. I can't wait to hear all about it. And please know that many of us will now be with you and with Isis, the goddess of magic, to celebrate the solar eclipse and welcome Osiris back to the waking world. Thank you, Jen, and blessed be. Now, on to my guest. Jodi Wille is a director and producer of the critically acclaimed documentary The Source Family, and the director of her brand new feature documentary, Welcome Space Brothers, which is about the Unarius Academy of Science. Jodi's work explores people whose extraordinary true stories and creations leave us with new ways of seeing, and she has a special interest in so-called outsider artists, alternative spiritual seekers, and radical intentional communities. Jodi has a background in commercial, editorial, and rock band photography, as well as music video direction, working with artists like REM, Sparks, and Vincent Gallo. She also co-founded the book publishing companies Dilettante Press, Process Media, and Otherworld to explore otherworldly and countercultural realms. And she has edited several award-winning books, most recently co-authoring the illustrated book Family, the Source Family Scrapbook, which came out in 2022 from Otherworld with Sacred Bones. Jodi has curated art exhibitions for the American Visionary Art Museum, Deitch Projects, and others, and she's curated numerous film festivals and cultural programs at institutions across the globe. Jodi joined me from her editing bay in California via Zoom. Jodi Wille, welcome to the Witch Wave.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be on the fabulous Witch Wave.
It's about time. I have wanted you on this show for so long. You and I have been friends for many, many years now. I was trying to remember when we first met, and I cannot recall. Was it that big walk we took in LA a long time ago?
I think it was before that. I knew about you and I was kind of following you and I was thinking about trying to program some stuff with you at a theater.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I was a longtime fan of yours.
Well, back at you.
Yeah.
Back at you. Well, it's so, so great to have you. And Jodi, there's so many directions I want to go in today, but I think I want to start with your most recent project because I just watched it a couple days ago. I absolutely loved it. This is your brand new documentary called Welcome, Space Brothers. And we should tell folks that this is not something that they can stream or see in theaters just yet, but they can see it at different events. And do you want to maybe just set up where you're at in the process and then tell us a little bit about the film?
Yeah, actually, I'm in Los Angeles right now making some final tweaks on the film. And we had our premiere of the film last October at Beyond Fest and then had a big screening at the Los Angeles Theater in November for like 1,000 people. It was amazing. It's been really fun. So we're just doing like a rollout at festivals right now. We have this super exciting festival coming up April 5th through 8th. Atlas Obscura is doing an ecliptic festival where they are honoring the big full solar eclipse with a whole weekend of speakers and bands. And they're showing films, but our film is the only new film they're showing. They're showing Fantastic Planet and Trip to the Moon.
Yes.
And then they're going to be showing Welcome, Space Brothers. And then after that, they're showing the Unarius film, The Arrival, Doors Under the Sky. So people come if you can. It's going to be amazing. And then after that, I go right to the Athens International Film Festival in Athens, Ohio, show it there. We're going to be in San Francisco showing it at the San Francisco Doc Fest in late May, early June. And we've got a screening in Melbourne Film Festival coming up. We'll probably have more along the way this year, but this year is kind of our festival run, which is a lot of fun.
So exciting.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the film. When you're describing it, I could certainly like wax lyrical about it all day, but I would rather you tell us, what is Welcome Space Brothers about?
Welcome Space Brothers is about an extraterrestrial channeling spiritual community that was run by a very charismatic woman in her 70s, which in the 1970s became this wildly prolific filmmaking collective and creative collective, and ended up putting their films on public access and became these sort of darlings of public access. And their films were shown in up to 30 states over the decades. And this film is about the very wild trajectory of the group, which goes all the way back to the 50s, but it's really a character study of Ruth Norman, aka Archangel Uriel, who was the fearless leader of the group and who really got going as an independent filmmaker at the age of 77 and continued on for many years. Yeah.
And I was so struck when I watched the film by the fact that this is a group. I know they didn't necessarily call themselves a religion. I think the word they used was like interdimensional science or something like that.
Yeah, I think they would consider themselves like a self-mastery school, a spiritual school, a nonprofit educational group.
Yes.
That's how they talk about it. Yeah.
But the organizing principle of this school, and we'll get into some of the myth and the lore and stuff, but it isn't like hierarchical in terms of like, it doesn't feel like a cult, I suppose, is what I'm dancing around. It feels like, some kind of alternative mystery school or something, or we might compare it to like a secret society or an order or something like that. And I was really struck by like, yes, it's both this spiritual group, but it's, like you said, a film production company. There's lots of costume. There's lots of movies. There's books that they write. There's pageantry and vibrant, dazzling decor. Like, it's an incredibly prismatic, I don't even know if I want to call it high camp, but it's like dancing around that.
That's there.
Yeah, in terms of the way that they express themselves. So it also almost feels like a mini artist colony or something as well. Is that how you think of them?
I was describing it to somebody a while back and I said, Unarius was almost like this West Coast Warholian factory with
Yes.
a female leader who was more focused on spiritual healing and transformation than what Warhol was focused on.
Yes.
But it was very similar to that. So she was this charismatic character like Warhol was. She had people underneath her like Gerard Malanga, who are sort of making the films. And she was the guiding force
Yes.
behind all of it. And it was a collective effort with a lot of people, but there were definitely some bright lights who stuck out more than the others and who directed more films than the others and were closer to her than the others as well. It
Absolutely.
was a creative collective, ultimately. That's how I see it, as sort of like a spiritually directed creative collective, artist collective in some ways, but then also it's a folk healing group. It's a channeling school. I mean, there are so many things. It's impossible to put it into sound bites, really.
Yes, which is why it needs to be this documentary because you explore so many different corners and aspects of this group. And I was so taken by, do you call her the leader? Is that how you would explain Uriel?
Yeah, you could call her the co-founder of the group,
Mm-hmm.
the main teacher. I think the
Mm-hmm.
students saw her as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She saw herself as a teacher. That was really what I learned was most important to her.
Mm-hmm.
But then she was also considered this extra dimensional being when she was overshadowed by the archangel Uriel. So she was Ruth Norman. She was a human being, but what she claimed is that she was being overshadowed by this magnificent, gigantic, eternal force of the universe, Archangel Uriel. And when she was being overshadowed, she sort of embodied Uriel. She became Uriel, and people called her Uriel.
Yeah, so it reminds me almost of like in voodoo practice, how people say they're being ridden by a loa, It's like she like channels this angel and becomes this angel for a time. Is that correct?
You could refer to voodoo practice. There's so many communities. You've got like the New Age channeling communities of the 80s and 90s, the Seth,
Mhm.
books that were channeled. So you have all of these books, but you also have Swedenborg
Sure.
back in the 1700s who was doing channeling, I guess maybe in a different way, but you got this history of people bringing others through.
Yes. So, can you just give us like a few of the tenets of this community? What did they believe primarily?
Yeah, really interesting because they're so colorful and outlandish by a lot of people's estimations, especially Uriel and her like glittery rainbow capes and her like sparkly platform shoes and her candy colored wigs.
Yes.
She was very, very outlandish. But for me, as I was, entering into their cosmology and their main principles, what I found underneath that kind of candy coating wrapping was fundamental, like classic esoteric principles, metaphysical understandings of the universe as energy. The universe is energy. There is no death. We are eternal beings. They believed in reincarnation. They still believe in reincarnation. So they have these fundamental ideas that run through a number of metaphysical groups and also some Eastern spiritual communities, but they get really granular with the ideas. So they have a teaching called past life therapy. So they don't just believe, oh, you've been here before and you'll come here again. They believe, because they're a healing community, part of what they believe, or they would say recognize, they don't really call it a belief. They consider it this sort of like embodiment of understanding problems that we have as human beings in this life, whether they're emotional problems, physical problems, spiritual problems, or, issues we have with other people, usually stem from other lifetime shocks to the system.
Mm.
And so they have this really, what I found to be quite advanced understanding, or just a philosophy, let's call it, of reincarnation, where you can address these things. They work with what they consider to be these advanced spiritual beings.
Mhm.
So some people might call them angels, in other cultures, but they're benevolent, advanced beings who can inspire you with good ideas or guidance, which you can choose to take or not take. It's kind of, in some ways, like a spiritualist idea or an ascended master's idea, like the Theosophist. But anyway, so they call them the Space Brothers, can help you to tune into these other lifetimes, can help you see where you might have had issues in other lifetimes. And so that was an idea that came forward with Ruth and her husband, Ernest, before he passed away in the 70s, because they're a group that was formed in the 50s. They had these books, where Ernest was claiming to channel the Space Brothers, and Ruth was his sort of helper at that point and book publisher. She learned how to book publish. When he passed away, she took on the mantle of being the channel. By all accounts, was also psychic. He was like a super advanced clairvoyant by many accounts, which I find so fascinating and perhaps believable just because I've known a few.
Yeah, yeah.
And he seems pretty solid in my understanding of that. But anyway, what she did was she was a very exuberant person and wanted to start a center. And so after he passed away, she started the center and she was like, I'm going to bring people in. We're going to take this idea of past life therapy and work with people in person to work on their past,
Yes.
And then because she loved movies, she always loved movies. She actually was an actress. She acted in community plays when she was younger as well.
Yes.
So she liked acting. Oh my gosh, it's just like such a long story. I have to like really keep focused. After she predicted the landing of the Space Brothers in the 70s, when she became a national like folk hero and landed on all these national TV programs.
Yeah, she was on Letterman.
She was on Letterman. She was on like Walter Cronkite's CBS News. She was on a number of like national news shows. She was in the Washington Post, She seemed to realize the power of the media and was like, I don't want to just have them interviewing me. We're going to make our own media. That was only after she became sort of celebrity on these national programs. And a whole bunch of young people and older people came to El Cajon where they had their center. So anyway, it was just the arrival of especially these talented young people who, one of them was a filmmaker, one was a really talented artist, the other was a super talented musician, that she'd got the idea to start a film studio. And before they knew it, they were making these very, very wild, outlandish psychodramas, which is what Unarius is probably mostly known about.
Yes. Yes. And these psychodramas, they start to be shown on like public access television all over California, at least, right?
Well, they did. She had a student who was at the time a film student who was also working at a local public access channel. And he was the one who came up with the idea. And she just immediately jumped on that and invested a lot of her own money because she was a successful businesswoman before Unarius, invested thousands of dollars into equipment, cutting edge video equipment, which was not cheap back then.
Totally.
And created this whole studio. So yeah, she did.
I mean, at one point in the film, someone says like she put like $30,000 into just getting, I think, sound equipment at one point. Like this was like a huge investment of this person's money. It's really pretty radical if you think about it. And I think of her as a very radical figure. Like this is, as you said earlier, a senior citizen, right? She's like an older woman, which is like one of my favorite topics to talk about, as listeners know, who's having this creative renaissance. She's heading up this school. She's heading up this production company. She's starring in a lot of this stuff in these amazing glamazon, almost like drag level costumes. She's the fucking best in that way. And it also struck me, one of the things that makes your film different than a lot of like movies about cults or different societies or whatever is like, there's not a lot of salaciousness to this story. There's definitely some like intrigue, there's some darkness, there's some a little bit of sexual politics and relationships and things like that, but it's not like it all goes south and they all murder each other or something. Like it's very uplifting for the most part. And it got me thinking like, I wonder if it's because I want to speak very broadly. I know there are some terribly evil behaving women in the world, but I feel like this is a group that it's headed by an older woman. And so she's not out there trying to like fuck everybody. You know what I mean? The way a lot of these charismatic dude leaders often are. I don't know. Do you think that's a fair thing to say? What do you think?
I mean, I spent 7 years really digging deep with this stuff and having a lot of wine with members,
Yeah.
after 10 o'clock at night and getting some very intriguing stories and juicy stories. And I think that Ruth Norman she was such an unusual, incredible force of nature. She was a complex human being. She was a complicated human being, too.
And a real human being. She's flawed. She has an ego. She definitely gets attracted to someone in the group, but
Yeah,
it doesn't become that salacious level of like abuse that I
no,
feel like happens in so many of these stories.
it's true.
I was so happy about that.
Oh, I know.
I was like, can this
Yeah,
woman just live and like be her fabulous, visionary, kooky, artistic self? And I
yeah.
was kind of holding my breath, like waiting for like, and then it all goes south. And it doesn't. And I was so happy about that, Jodi. Like there's
Mm,
tension and there's conflict, and we'll talk about some of that stuff. But
yeah.
I really walked away liking her. And that was fun to
Oh.
watch.
Well, that makes me really happy because I feel like I walked away liking her too after getting to know her over many years through other people and having all kinds of feelings go through it, on my path of discovery, but aiming to be thorough with it. And I mean, she was a passionate lady. Like, let's be real. Like, she was surrounded by handsome young men. She loved handsome young men. But from the people I talked to, she was decent. Like, she cared about her students. She saw herself as a teacher beyond all else. And she cared about the greater good of the group. So I think that even she, like every leader in any community, has opportunities and can struggle with ego and
Yes.
can struggle with the power that they're given and really have to think hard about that. But what I got was that she was really able to keep herself focused on that and the greater good. And I think the legacy plays out to show that when you see so many people, even the ones who left in anger, like they still went on to do great things. It wasn't like they were crumpled up in a ball after they left Unarius. They
Right.
actually went on to do fantastic things, which I think is a good sign as well. And so for me, like what was most meaningful about making this film was that I've studied a number of groups over the last 20 years. I've also gotten to know some of the top scholars who have studied many groups for decades, including Gordon Melton, who is just like the Mac Daddy of cult experts, new religious movement
Yes.
experts,
Yes.
really.
Yes.
And that's the proper term for these groups, even though,
They might not have said religion, but they kind of sort of fall into the rubric of religion insofar as there's like
yeah.
mythology, there's ceremony, there's spiritual belief, there's principles. But yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you.
exactly. But what I learned from getting to know these groups firsthand and spending time with them, but most importantly, too, just getting to know these scholars and their work, is that these groups that we come to know as cults, through corporate culture, mainstream pop culture, we get told these same stories again and again about like the Manson family, about Jonestown, about Heaven's Gate, these few groups, that get played over and over again. But what we don't hear about are the literally thousands, according to scholars, thousands of new religious movements and communities who over the last, 300 years have been foundational to our culture, who allow for so many things during times of cultural like instability, decay. They provide these sort of safe zones for people who are interested in exploring ideas outside of the mainstream. It was an incredible privilege to get to work with one of these groups who is, by all accounts, a benign group, who I came to really have a lot of respect for, but who also happened to be extremely colorful, wild, crazy, funny,
Yes.
and
Yes.
outlandish, who were the perfect group for me to be able to tell that story about.
Ah, gorgeous. On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This episode of The Witch Wave is brought to you by Mithras Candle. Witches know candles are more than just mood lighting or decor. They are powerful tools of wisdom and magic. Candles held sacred significance for our ancestors, embodying hope, renewal, and comfort during the darkest hours. Candle makers, or chandlers, were often spiritual folk, priestesses, monks, druids, and witches, those who knew the significance of these ancient lights. In these modern times, my pagan friends at Mithras Candle uphold this candle-making tradition with reverence. Made by hand, each Mithras candle is a testament to purity and craftsmanship using the most sacred of materials, beeswax. Picture the gentle flicker of beeswax candles carrying the natural aroma of honey and floral notes. And while their Byzantine hand-dripped pillars steal the show, Mithras offers a variety of shapes and colors, including seasonal delights like the soon-to-be-announced green candles for May. Ready to illuminate your space with arcane luxury? Visit mithrascandle.com today and use offer code WITCH24 to enlighten your world with 24% off your first order. That's M as in magic, ITHRAS, candle.com, and use WITCH24 for 24% off your first order.
The Witch Wave is sponsored by BetterHelp. How is your social battery right now? Are you feeling drained, or are you exploding with energy, or somewhere in the middle? I think about my social battery all the time because I am actually an introvert who performs as an extrovert. In other words, I love speaking with people and presenting and meeting people and being out in the world, but I actually need a lot of alone time and downtime to recharge. Being social definitely brings me a lot of joy, but it also drains my social battery. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that I was actually an introvert and that I needed to prioritize making time to be alone, to read a book, to be quiet, to just replenish. It can be so easy to ignore our social battery and spread ourselves thin, especially with there being more social gatherings and events picking up after the winter. Everyone's kind of coming out of hibernation. But what is the right amount of socializing for you? And how do you recharge? Maybe you thrive around people. Or maybe you really need some more alone time. Therapy can give you the self-awareness to build a social life that doesn't drain your battery. And therapy has helped me figure this out myself so that I'm sure that if I have a lot of social plans on the calendar, I also now know to book a lot of off days or off hours so I can then recharge. And that's why I love therapy so much, because it's not only for times of extreme emotion or crisis, it also helps develop ways so you can support yourself in the day-to-day. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find your social sweet spot with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/witchwave today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/witchwave. Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Jodi Wille. So Jodi, as we're talking about Unarius and Ruth, or Uriel as her name sometimes was, it's getting me thinking about all of these other groups that were kind of starting in 1954. People trace Scientology to 1954. Wicca is sometimes traced to 1954. And what's so interesting to me there is like some of these groups, and we could debate about this, I have my own opinions, but I think some of the groups got very dark and destructive. And some of those groups, I think, are helping people flourish. And of course, there's probably shades of gray within all of them, right? But I'm wondering, like, what do you think it was about that time period, the 50s, that was such a hotbed for some of these new religions, as you call them?
Yeah, I think from what I understand in the research that I've done, these new religions, they always exist. They're always around. I mean, they've been around since at least Pythagoras, who had his own so-called cult or mystery school and got run out of town and accused of being a cult leader. But there are times in the emergence, rise and fall, these cycles that societies go through that are, rife with instability. And I think in the 50s, these groups flourished in the 1840s, where there was a lot of change and instability. So I would say change and instability causes the genesis of some of these groups, perhaps. I mean, just on a sociological level, I think in the 1950s, quite a bit of it had to do with the threat of nuclear annihilation.
Yep, exactly.
And the fact that for the first time in human history, someone could actually destroy the whole world. And I think there was a lot of fear going around. There was a lot of authoritarian sort of impulses rising up to squash people, in Hollywood,
Yep.
the Red Scare, things
Sure,
like that. So
sure.
there was a lot of othering going on of social communities and existentialist malaise. And I think that when the economy's bad, when there's existentialist fear, these movements that help to ground people in a philosophy that runs outside of the typical Christian ideas or the mainstream religious ideas, they can appeal to a lot of people who have metaphysical inclinations,
Yes.
that go beyond the sort of major religions, people who like radical or DIY
Yeah.
spiritual leaders and groups, which is my
Yes.
interest.
Yes.
That's my idea for it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was thinking too about how Unarius to me feels a little bit like there's some connective tissue between them and some 19th century groups like the Theosophical Society, which was also co-founded by a very charismatic older woman, Madame Blavatsky. And then I was thinking of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was also a bunch of bohemians. These are actors and poets and writers all getting together and wearing costumes and exploring different kinds of occult lore and initiation and mythology. And there's something very kind of bohemian about all of these kinds of societies too. And even the Freemasons, which a lot of these societies kind of have roots in or shared energy with, I think, where the Masons, they would and still do, they wear costumes, they do theater. I mean, these rituals are theater. And theater has these deep roots in ritual and initiation and trying to channel the gods. I mean, if we trace it even as far back as ancient Greece and ancient Japan and all of these different pageant cultures of putting on plays, putting on shows, putting on festivals, dances to then have these ecstatic experiences. So I love the way that this documentary, and I think your work in general, Jodi, really kind of celebrates and probes the overlap between art and spirituality. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that because it seems like you're really attracted to both of those things.
Yes, I love your comparisons, by the way, to the Freemasonic, their cosplay.
But that's what it all is, right? I mean, Christianity's cosplay,
It's all
Judaism, it's all
cosplay.
cosplay. Yeah,
It
right,
is.
right.
I think there's something so powerful about putting on vestment that allows you to become someone else rapidly, or putting on the makeup and the hair. And for Unarius, building these elaborate sets. I mean, it
Yes.
was ingenious what they did to
Music.
allow people
Yes.
to sort of go into an altered state where they sincerely believed they were embodying their other lifetimes. One thing I want to say, though, before I address your question about art and creativity is the fundamental difference between Unarius and the Theosophists and the Freemasons groups, esoteric groups like that. They didn't do ritual magic. They were not magicians at all. They didn't have any hidden secret rituals. They were much more like the spiritualists, which I'm so fascinated in. Whereas the spiritualists, which was such a huge movement in the 1840s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, the 19th century.
Yeah, it almost became the official religion of America. It was so big then.
Yes.
Where they were focused on sort of talking with the dead, people close to you, getting messages from dead relatives, not being controlled by them, not being told what to do by any of them, but being able to communicate with them. Unarius, Ernest Norman, and Ruth Norman were not just going for regular dead people. They were channeling the greatest minds who ever lived on planet Earth and then extraterrestrial, beings. So they were actually doing that sort of thing.
Right.
But as far as like the connection between art and spirituality, it's so interesting. I have to say that I've been really interested in that since I was a teenager. And it came from me when I was just a teenager, being exposed to some incredibly talented and just unique artists from the American South. So I had a boyfriend when I was like 19 years old who went down south. He was working with the outsider artist, the self-taught artist, Howard Finster. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yes, I do. But tell our listeners, yes.
He was a Baptist minister and a bicycle repairman with a sixth grade education who built one of the greatest self-taught environments in America and became this very prolific and very successful artist in the 80s who was championed by Keith Haring, REM, the Talking Heads. He, did a lot of their album covers. My boyfriend was working with Howard Finster, helping refurbish his Paradise Gardens. And so when I was 19, we would go down on these trips to Georgia, to other states. And he introduced me to a number of these self-taught visionary artists. So Howard, even though he was a Baptist minister, he was seeing UFOs. He was painting the UFOs. He had a very unusual take on Christianity that involved what I see now years later to be sort of this like shamanic insight. I think he had, second sight. He had the gift to see into other dimensions. I didn't know that when I was a teenager. I just knew that his art was extremely potent and the art from these other people I was meeting, many who consider themselves Christians, but were very far out, who often said, it's not me doing the painting.
Right.
God is channeling through me. The angels spoke to me. I met, strangely, a lot of those artists and spent time with them. And they just affected me so deeply. And after that, I spent time going to, seeing a lot of contemporary art. I was very into art in general, at that age. But after sitting with those artists and spending time with them, it just moved me in a way that just shaped me heavily. And I was always interested in artists who were creating outside the contemporary art paradigm.
Yes.
People who didn't even really call themselves artists necessarily, and who were just getting their ideas from their intuition, basically, from either their intuition or from these outside sources. It just really affected me. And then when I came out to Los Angeles, after I graduated college and I was, directing music videos and I became a photographer for rock bands, I started noticing these very unusual buildings in Los Angeles and found out that they were built by these very strange and unusual spiritual communities. And I started visiting some of them, specifically this group called the Universal World Church, which was this wild, it was a church that was also this incredible self-taught environment led by this charismatic husband and wife team. I ended up documenting them, and that sort of really got me. I was documenting Howard Finster and these other artists as well. But when I came out here, I actually directed a Christmas special for Miss Velma and Dr. Jaggers that they actually love so much. They made VHS dubs for every family in their church.
Oh my goodness. Incredible, Jodi. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. And I was so just in love with them, her dresses that she wore and the incredible time and devotion that was put into these really unusual sculptures in that church. I will do a book on that one day. I have hundreds and hundreds of pictures. I was the first outsider they let photograph their group.
Amazing.
Yeah. But that really got me into it and going, and sort of ultimately led to this film,
Yes. California is such an interesting hotbed for this. Here on the East Coast, we have what's called the burned over district, which, this was our kind of area of lots of different new religions, as you might call them, and spiritualist groups and all of that. But on the West Coast, obviously there's Manly P. Hall and, the Philosophical Research Society is still going strong, which is one of my favorite places in LA.
Go check it out, people. It's my favorite place to see any event or movie in Los Angeles. Philosophical Research Society.
It's the best. And I know you do stuff with them sometimes.
Yes.
I remember this book that an acquaintance of mine put out called Visionary State by Eric Davis. And
absolutely.
Eric Davis, I'm sure he'll come on the show one day. Just an incredible scholar of the visionary, the outsider, the alternative, and so on. But I hadn't realized until his book, because I'm here on the East Coast,
how many of these buildings and societies and spiritual organizations that are alternative kind of cropped up in that area. What do you make of that? Do you think it's the proximity to Hollywood, or does it trace back to even older?
I think it's the fact that California used to be part of Lemuria. I mean, that is the lore.
Say more, say more.
In many groups, well, they just believe that, California was part of the ancient land of Lemuria or Mu. I mean, that's like, the mythology of a number of metaphysical groups.
Tell us what this is. Like, I know people are going to be familiar with Atlantis, but probably not a lot of
Yeah.
people know what you're talking about. So please tell the good people.
I mean, just Google Lemuria, Lemuria, and you can learn much more than I do. I mean, to me, I feel like there's mythology that can maybe be a partial explanation if perhaps maybe it might be true. Who knows? It's ancient history. And I
Yeah.
don't discount anything like that because I feel like our understanding of history and ancient history is just so limited.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I think that also some part of it's just the land itself lends itself to enchantment. There's so much nature out here. I'm sitting in Beechwood Canyon right now, which is like the home of the Theosophists. I'm up on a hill with this beautiful view of the Griffith Observatory, and it's incredibly enchanting just physically up here. Also, California, it was the sort of last place to go as far as like manifest destiny and cheap land.
Sure.
California's always been open to alternative healing. Back in the 1800s, many people came out here, 1900s, to heal from tuberculosis. That was one of the things. California was a place for a lot of people offering alternative healing treatments. Natural food, raw food was huge here in the 30s. And so I just think it lends itself to this land, alternative ideas that might be too radical for the heartland, potentially.
Absolutely.
It provided the cheap real estate for people to put their stake in the ground and build a church and be tolerated, and possibly even embraced.
Mm.
A lot of the free thinkers, I mean, it's still happening, Silicon Valley happened in California.
Yeah.
A lot of the cutting edge of new ideas happens out here.
Human consciousness. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. On that note, we're going to take another quick break and we'll be right back.
You've heard me wax ecstatic about Snowy Owl Tea before, and so you will understand why I am so excited to announce that I have teamed up with them to create an exclusive Witch Wave herbal tea blend just for you. Witch Wave tea combines some of my favorite botanicals, including nettles, rosehip, lavender, elderflower, and vanilla. And there's also some butterfly pea flower in there, which means that if you squeeze some lemon into your tea after it's brewed, the color will change, just like magic. And of course, it comes in Snowy Owl's signature shiny holographic packaging with a brand new black cat and purple moon label, all of which makes me swoon. This Witch Wave tea blend from me and Snowy Owl is now available in the Witch Wave shop while supplies last. So head on over to witchwavepodcast.com/shop to order yours now. It's currently the only place where you can buy this tea blend. But don't forget to also check out Snowy Owl Tea's other delicious tea blends over on their website, snowyowltea.com, and you'll see why I fell in love with their handcrafted, scrumptious, full-leaf tea and blossom blends in the first place. Some of my favorites of theirs include Second Breakfast, which is a blend of lemon, poppy seed, and oat, and 11th Hour Black Tea, which has vanilla and cardamom. And best of all, Snowy Owl is offering 10% off any teas ordered from their site using code POTION. So head over to snowyowltea.com and use code POTION for 10% off their house blends. And if you want our new, exclusive, delicious, color-changing Witch Wave herbal tea blend, you can order that now over at witchwavepodcast.com/shop.
This season of The Witch Wave is brought to you in part by Sphere and Sundry.
an astro-magical atelier where you can get expertly elected materia magica, oils, incense, bath salts, salves, inks, beauty oils, and more, which have been ritually crafted during rare, powerful, and benefic astrological configurations. And oh my word, I can tell you firsthand, this is the stuff. These formulas are chosen in accord with the strict requirements of the talismanic tradition outlined in the Picatrix and other ancient grimoires, meaning you can benefit from the power of amazing astrological transits even when the stars haven't aligned. These are incredible tools for witches who are looking to embrace the manifestations and results of their spell work, especially the Luna in Cancer series. And I myself have the Luna in Cancer incense, and it is a dream to use for any kind of lunar magic. Venus materia can be used for love, glamour, and attraction. Regulus for fame and recognition, Asclepius for healing and transformation, and Deneb al-Gedi for protection. I also used several of Sphere and Sundry's magical products on site in Greece during our group rituals, and they were so potent and so exquisite. I can't say enough good things about them. Since 2018, Sphere and Sundry have been a key driver in the rising tide of popularity and interest in astrological magic, amassing over 5,000 five-star reviews and field reports on their website. Most orders ship within one business day, and Sphere and Sundry is also well known for their incredible customer service, as they are their magical results, and I can attest to that as well. Learn more and get $10 off your first order at sphereandsundry.com using the code WitchWave. That's sphereandsundry.com, sphereandsundry.com, and use code WitchWave for $10 off your first order. Hi, Witch Wavers. I have exciting news. At long last, we have some new Witch Wave merch available for you now through TeePublic. We decided to go with TeePublic for our new Witch Wave merch because it is a print-on-demand site, which means you can get different variations of the Witch Wave logo printed on t-shirts, mugs, totes, stickers, magnets, notebooks. Oh my gods, the sky's the limit. And the shirts come in different styles and fabrics and colors and are available in sizes small through 5XL, so you can order whatever you'll feel you're most magical in. So head on over to witchwavepodcast.com/shop.
Welcome back to the Witch Wave. Today I'm speaking with Jodi Wille. So Jodi, as I've told you before, this interesting synchronicity happened with you and me, wherein just around the time you and I started talking, I realized that I still had some old Netflix discs just sitting in our cabinet, which we never returned. And of course, no one uses the Netflix discs anymore. It's all streaming. But I still have these discs that I haven't sent back. And one of them just so happens to be your, I think, first major feature documentary, The Source Family. And it's just so funny to me synchronistically that I happen to have this DVD and then we became friends and so on. And I just can't let it go yet.
I love it. It's a collectible now. Hold on tight.
No one's asked
That's
for
so
it
cool.
back, so I don't even know. But I was just curious, what's the difference for you between working on The Source Family and this latest documentary? Because, The Source Family got so much attention. This was also about an alternative spiritual community. My read of that is that it was a bit of a darker story. There's some positivity in it, but there's definitely lots more of a dude, charismatic leader, and he has many, many lovers. And I'm wondering, does this story feel a lot different for you to tell? And I suppose, why did you want to tell this story as your kind of follow-up to The Source Family?
That is a very good question. I mean, I would say First of all, like the Source family, it's so interesting. That film is such a Rorschach with people. I mean, different people see a lot of different things in that movie. Some people see it and they're like, oh my God, I'm glad my children weren't alive during that time. And then other people see it and they were like, oh, they were so amazing. I wish I was alive during that. I was there during that time. Like what they were going for was so great.
Yeah.
And I also find that people in spiritual communities have a different understanding of it too. They don't focus on, oh my gosh, he had 14 wives. They understand the paradoxes that
Yes.
lie in these communities. Every community like this is, you have to understand the paradox of it and then just sort of understand these things that come into play. Anyway, the Source family was definitely more of a mixed bag. With Unarius, what was really different about it, which was a delight to me, which is that the group was definitely more functional. And what I love about them most of all is they still exist. They still have their events, every weekend. They still drive their space cad, the Mother Goose Parade. Their choir still sings at senior citizens' homes. Like they still have a very meaningful situation for the people who are part of the group. And so it was really a joy to get to work with a group that is still active and yet was still at the same time, like the Source family, through the process of making the film, coming to a different understanding of their experience, being able to see it contextualized for the first time. And it wasn't easy to do that because for me, they had no creative control over the film whatsoever. They put a lot of trust in me, but they also knew that I was, wanting to make a film that was accurate and, respectful, but warts and all.
Yes, yes.
Both the Source family and Unarius, put their trust in me to do that. And I definitely don't take it lightly. It was fun to work with a group that is still active. They still get along with each other. They find a way to get along. They're just different. The Source family had a lot of chiefs, like the group broke up and the people are in the Source family. I have so much respect for, like, they're all very independent minded, including his wives. Like you have never seen so many fiercely independent women who know what they know and are very comfortable in who they are,
Yes.
which is very interesting and still love him, love Father Yod. But, with Unarius, it's just nice to see a group that's still active and that has turned into a leaderless collective and operate kind of like a well-oiled long-term marriage, of sorts. I've learned a lot about being a collective from them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love what you said also about how the Source family is a Rorschach test. I mean, unless something terrible happens and then we all go, oh my God, that was awful. Everybody died or whatever, right? But I was thinking, like, I'm out in these streets, like calling myself a witch. Like, a lot of people think that's weird. And your point earlier about how, like, all religions are cosplay. Like, I remember being a little Jewish kid and hearing about how my Catholic friends were drinking blood and eating a body every Sunday. And I was horrified. Like, think about that. But because Christianity is so major, everybody's just used to it. Oh, yeah, we just drink blood and eat a body like every weekend. And so I really appreciate that a lot of your films and a lot of your work, your books, and so on really kind of make us look at these groups anthropologically and make us then reconsider, like, well, what is weird and why is it that some of these groups make us uncomfortable and some of them we've somehow just treated as normal. And a lot of it comes down to, like, how powerful or how moneyed and how popular some of them get, like Christianity.
Yeah.
So I just really appreciate that you make me think about these things too and make the viewers really ask the questions of, like, the question that comes to me when I watch Welcome Space Brothers is like, well, why not? I mean, if it works for them, like, I think it's kooky as hell. I also think it's, like, beautiful and I love the costumes. So I'm, like, into watching it. It's not for me. I think it's kind of kooky and out there. But for some people, like, it works and they would think I'm a fucking kook, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think witches are kooks or that they're demonic,
Sure.
and I feel like, for me, I just feel like there's room for rich discussion around these spiritual subcultures and alternative beliefs these days who, these groups and these people, witches, who in the past and throughout history have been overwhelmingly mocked or misunderstood or demonized. And they're often presented in just crude caricature, by mainstream media and power structures. And I feel that, from my experience and from what I know, for the most part, all the witches I know are pretty benign. They're
Yeah.
mostly focused on healing. All of the groups I know, these spiritual groups, are very similar, and they often offer their participant these like deeply rewarding, ineffable experiences and community, creative opportunity. And to me personally, I find them to be very compelling lifestyle alternatives to the late capitalist, materialist paradigm, and they're worthy of our respect to examine. My goal as a filmmaker is to come at the subject with a sort of compassionate lens, because I feel like when you can do that, you give people a chance to really reveal themselves in a way that we don't see them revealed. They can reveal their hearts to us,
Yes, yes.
and then we can see them as human beings. And that's my hope anyway.
Well, I absolutely think, at least the cut of the film that I have seen, you nail that. And I walked away from the film with a lot of different feelings, but the overall feeling was like, that was awesome. And these people are so radical and they're so creative and exuberant. And of course, they're complicated and it might not be the path that I would walk, but I'm so happy they exist. I'm so happy I learned about Ruth Norman. Like, what a badass visionary. Like, I was obsessed with her. I
Oh,
really think you nailed it, Jodi. And I know that people are going to want to
wow.
see the
Thank you.
film. You plugged some of the festivals and so on. How can people help support you in terms of getting this film to the next level? I foresee eventually it'll be in theaters and streaming and all of that, but I know that there are some
Yes.
other kind of benchmarks you need to reach. So how can we support that for you?
Oh, I appreciate you asking that so much because this is a fiercely independently made film. We made it with a first class team of award winning senior editors. My producer, Karen Capitosto, she produced the documentary on Mr. Rogers, and Little
Yes.
Richard.
Oh, I loved the Little Richard documentary. I just watched that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Karen is so talented and
Ah,
she's just been such a dream to work with, believing in this film. But films are expensive to make and we're still in the process of selling it. And so we still have some money that we'd like to raise to help roll it out, get it rolled out for the festival. So that we definitely want to raise. So if anybody is interested in contributing to the film, we have this nonprofit arrangement with International Documentary Association where people can donate completely tax deductible contributions, and even like a small contribution or a big one. So if anybody goes to like my Instagram page or Welcome Space Brothers Instagram page and scroll down a little bit, or go to our bios, the links in the bios, you can see a spot where you can donate. We're finishing the film probably, I don't know, in the next few weeks. But if people are interested in contributing meaningfully, reach out to me. And we even have a spot for a producer. I mean, if somebody is very excited about the film, wants to see it, and wants to potentially jump on as a producer, reach out to me. And if you want to help in smaller but very meaningful ways, just find our links on our website and we'll get your name on as a special thank you. You can be a part of our special credits. Thank you, Pam, so much for all of that. I appreciate that, your support.
oh, of course, of course. And I'm going to put a link in the show notes to a place where people can contribute as well, just so that's easy for them to find after our conversation too. Jodi, I wish we had more time. There are so many other spokes on your wheel. I know your books, your curation. I mean, my goodness, all of the other projects that you work on. But I am just so in awe of you. I'm such a fan of your work and your documentaries. And I'm just so happy that we're friends. Thank you so much for coming on the Witch Wave. And if there's anything else that you want to make sure people know, now's your chance to plug it.
Oh, thank you so, so much, Pam. I adore you and I'm just so honored to be on the show. And no, I mean, I think that's really the thing right now. I've got a lot of projects that are bubbling under, nothing to announce yet, but come on out, people. Come see the film. Sign up on my newsletter. My website is jodiwille.com, JODIWILLE.com. And I'll keep you posted on all of the upcoming events. And I'm just so honored to be on your show, Pam. I adore you and thank you for all you do.
So mutual. Thank you so much, Jodi. That's it for the show. Thank you again to Jodi Wille for sharing her stellar storytelling with me.
Do you have questions, feedback, need some witchly advice, or just want to share something magical that happened to you recently? Please do drop us an email or a voice memo at witchwavepodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and you just might make it on the Witchwire. The Witch Wave is a Phantasmophile production written and produced by me, Pam Grossman. This episode was recorded and edited by Josh Wilcox and/or Walter Nordquist and myself. Our theme music is the song Hand and I by Lycanthia. Our new Witchwave logo was designed by Thunderwing, and special thanks, as always, go to Matt Freeman, Laura Antal, and Cece Pascal. You can check out information about this and other episodes on our website and now buy Witchwave merch over at witchwavepodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, and do consider giving us lots and lots of sparkly stars and glowing reviews. It really, truly does make a difference and helps other people find the show. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at WitchWavePod, and you can check out my witch emoji for iPhone by going to witchemoji.com or downloading it in the App Store. My book, Waking the Witch, is available everywhere now, and the Witchcraft book I edited and co-authored for Taschen is as well, so thank you for checking those out too. And if you want more Witchwave, or you would just like to support the show, please do join us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/witchwave. Thank you so much for listening. Witches are the future. I'll catch you next time on The Witch Wave.